All right, today we're going to talk about absolute monarchs in Europe. A little bit of intro, and then we're going to jump into an example with Spain. Well, first of all, what's a monarch? It's basically like a king or queen. Um, an absolute means like they totally control everything. Absolutely. That's where the term absolute comes from. So, absolutism definitely existed in Europe. Um, and essentially, what it means is it's a belief that one ruler should hold all the power within a country. So, an absolute monarch, like I mentioned, a king or a queen, or it could be someone that owns a vast amount of land, even land outside of the country, like an emperor, or in Russia, they call it a czar. And they have all the power within their country. And one of the key factors that gave them so much power, is the fact that people believed that the monarchs themselves believed that they had divine right. And basically, that meant that God gave them the power to rule. So when you're granted that kind of power, I mean, you're going to believe you could pretty much rule as you please. And people don't really question that or didn't question that because if you're questioning a monarch who is given power to rule by God, then essentially you're questioning God. No one really wanted to do that. So um, for a long time, people didn't really question the power of kings or queens or absolute monarchs. I definitely saw absolutism in Spain, or absolute monarchy in Spain. A key figure in this was Philip II. He had inherited Spain, but not only that, but Spanish Netherlands, which today is like Holland, for example, and also the American colonies, because Christopher Columbus sailed for the Spanish, and the Spanish had basically laid claim to Latin America, what we know as Latin America, including Mexico. So it was pretty vast what Philip had controlled. He also seized power from Portugal after his uncle had died without an heir, meaning he didn't have a son or daughter to take over. So Philip II gladly took over Portugal as well. And being that Spain was definitely a Catholic country, Philip II would lead the way in defeating the Muslims that were located there, and also persecuting the Protestants, which was another form of Christianity. Philip II also launched an attack against England with a fleet of ships called the Spanish Armada, as we can see here, these ships. But surprisingly, they lost. And the reason they attacked in the first place is because there were major religious differences between England, which is Protestant, and Spain, which was Catholic. Not to mention that the English had pirates that were taking ships, seizing ships that had gold on them. Hence, you get the terms like Pirates of the Caribbean, for example. And because those ships were bringing a lot of wealth, a lot of gold and silver back to Spain, that allowed for the Spanish to invest in luxury goods like art, for example. Uh, again, that wealth was brought from the colonies. But at the same time, because of all this gold and silver coming into the country, that actually devalued money. Because if you have too much of something, it becomes less valuable. And it also makes prices go up. If everyone has a lot of money in their disposal, then prices are going to go up. And that's not good for the average person who doesn't have access to money, or at least a lot of money. The nobles also they weren't taxed. Nobles are landowners, wealthy landowners. But on the contrary, the lower classes were taxed heavily, and they were the ones who could least afford to be taxed. The Spanish also were way behind when it came to manufacturing goods. They were using old-fashioned methods, expensive methods, and they also bought a lot of their goods from other countries. That's not a good thing. If you're buying more than you're selling, then that means you're going to go broke, which Spain did. Spanish also had to contend with revolt in the Netherlands, or Spanish Netherlands, led by a group of people called the Dutch. Uh, Philip had to maintain uh, an army to control subjects, and that was very costly. And the Dutch who were in the Netherlands, they weren't Spanish, so they had little in common with the Spanish, much less the Spanish rulers. And they were also Protestant. The Spanish tried to resist or raise taxes to crush the rebellion, but ultimately, uh, with a revolt and a fight against Spain, eventually the Dutch were able to free themselves from Spanish rule in 1579. So that's just a little glimpse at absolute monarchy and an example of how, or an absolute monarch in Spain, that being Philip II. And here we see Spain right here. If you go this direction, you have United States. If you go this direction, you have Latin America, including Mexico, Cuba. And the Spanish also had controlled the Spanish Netherlands, but the Dutch eventually were able to free themselves, again, as I mentioned, by 1579. But there are other monarchs too, and that included absolute monarchy in France, England, the Holy Roman Empire, and if you go further over here, Russia, which we will talk about at another time.